I'm Joseph Patrick, co-founder of Lamont Brothers, and in this video, I want to walk you through what is an ADU and what are some different types of ADUs. So first off, what's an ADU? An ADU stands for Accessory Dwelling Unit. So it's a smaller dwelling unit that's on the same lot, same piece of property as a house or another dwelling unit, but it's completely separate. So utilities can be completely separate, and often it's really designed as a long-term rental so that you can live in the home and rent out the ADU. Or you can retire into the ADU, you don't need that much space, and rent out the home for a larger rent. It's a real benefit, I think, to our cities because we, especially here in the Portland metro area, we don't have an expanse of land that's not farmland or forestry to really build into. And so increasing the density in the city is really, really helpful, and this is a great way to do that. So the first type is basement ADUs. So a basement, an underutilized basement, is a great place to invest some money and end up with a nice rentable dwelling unit, a different space. The things you want to think about as you think about a basement ADU is you want to think about access. How are we going to get down to the basement? What's that going to be like? You cannot add, at least in the city of Portland, you cannot add a street-facing door. So if you have a garage door, you can't convert that into a man door and make that your entrance to the ADU, at least right now. They change some of these zoning requirements regularly, but right now, you have to have a side or a back entrance because they don't want the front of the house to have two entrances and look like a duplex. So the other things to think about in the basement are your head height. You know, a lot of the Portland basements have a fairly low head height, and then you still have to get ductwork around in that basement space, either for the ADU or for the above stairs unit. So that's something you're going to want your architect or designer to really think about as they're designing the ADUs. What does my head height look like? Do we need to dig down? Digging down is totally possible, but that's going to increase your cost investment up front, so it's going to increase the time that it really takes the ADU to pay for itself, and then start putting money in your pocket. Another thing you're going to want to think about is you're going to want to think about the sound and fire separation between the ADU and the basement and the main level homes. We're sometimes adding rock soil insulation in there, which helps with the fire and sound, and then you're adding 2 layers of Type X drywall and maybe some sound channels below that so that we're really getting the fire and sound separation that we really want between the ADU space and your upstairs space. But that really pays off in the end. Other things you're going to want to think about is you're going to want to think about, how do I get light down in my basement? Sometimes we lift homes to put a basement ADU in there if there's not enough head height. If we do that, it really is an advantage to really allow more light in because we can do bigger windows, windows that are up out of the window wells a little bit more. But even if you're not doing that, think about bigger windows than you really typically see in basements. We just completed a basement remodel in Selwood where we did a pretty big, I think a 6 or 7 foot wide window with large window well that really made a massive difference in terms of the light that comes into the basement. The second type of ADU we'll talk about is a backyard cottage. So this is a separate structure from your home. You know, it's just a cottage somewhere in your backyard that we design as an ADU. So we're going to have to get sewer, water, electric, all of this we have to get out there. It's not already there. But doing a backyard ADU is really, really nice because it's totally separate from your living space. So we don't have to think about the sound and fire separation as much. It gives you just different separate spaces from either your renter or whoever's staying in the ADU. We can even cordon off the yard a little bit so they've got maybe a separate access down one side of the home that you don't really use, and then an additional fence to give them a little courtyard area that doesn't really encroach on your space at all, but it really separates the two spaces. So that's a really, really nice space, especially if you've got a large lot. Now, the kinds of things you're going to have to think about are, in Portland, it still has to match the exterior aesthetic of your home. So the city doesn't want a lot of ADUs popping up that look totally different from the home, don't feel like they fit with the neighborhood. It has to match in terms of roof pitch, siding, roofing material, has to look like it belongs. But you can put it sometimes right up against the lot line. Now, there's other requirements we have to think about when it goes right up against the lot line, but that's an advantage in some of these lots where we really want to push it as far back and as far over as we can. Sometimes we go right up against that lot line. Especially if we're doing that, we got to think about height. And there's different requirements for height. Sometimes we can get away with a 2-story backyard cottage, but if we're right up against the lot line, typically the height requirements don't allow us to do that. The third type of ADU is an ADU on top of a garage. So there's a few things to think about in terms of this type of ADU. One is the height requirements, because if we're doing it on top of a garage, we may run into city height requirements in planning, or we're just not going to be able to push it up against the lot line, typically because when we go against the lot line, there's just not enough height to make that work. But other than that, there's a lot of reasons to do an ADU over a garage. There's typically enough space in a 2-car garage that it makes a lot of sense. The layout just works, particularly if you cantilever out. Often you get up high enough that it's really a separate space from the main house. And often you can do an entrance that either works through the garage with a separate kind of like little utility entry space, or on the outside of a garage to get up there that lays out well and is fairly separate and detached from your main living space. The fourth type of ADU is an attached ADU. And this is an ADU that could be an addition on your existing home, or it could be a space inside your home that you convert to an ADU. Say like your attic, you could convert it to an ADU. Now, the things you want to think about with an attached ADU are you're going to want to think about access. The ADU has to have a completely separate access from the main living unit. Now, this could be the front door, you walk in the front door, and then you've got another door that goes up to your attic space that's been converted to an ADU. That can totally work, but your fire separation has to be completely separate from the main unit. And that entryway in that example would be shared living space. And then the moment you enter one of those doors that goes upstairs or into the main living unit, that's where your ADU or your separation start. Because the point of an ADU is it's like an apartment or almost like a townhome. It is a separate living unit. Other kinds of things you want to think about as far as advantages or disadvantages for an attached ADU is they work really, really good for compact lots or smaller lots, because if we're doing like a backyard cottage, we have to have some separation between the two units. And there's certain separation we have to meet for both fire and just layout and just aesthetic that really makes a backyard cottage work, when sometimes it makes sense just to bring those walls together and do an addition that's an attached ADU. With an attached ADU like this, you still have to meet all those fire separation and sound separation requirements, with the exception of if the space is already finished and you're just converting kind of use, like putting in a kitchen and maybe putting in an exterior door and converting it to an ADU that way. Sometimes the city does waive some of those sound and kind of isolation requirements. Now, you're going to want to think as a homeowner, especially if you're living in one side or the other, do I really want to waive those requirements so that they're not as separate as they really could be? Do I really want to hear what's going on the other side of that wall? Thanks for watching this video about different ADU types. For more info on remodeling in Portland, design build process, or ADUs, check out the rest of our YouTube channel, check out our website, and don't forget to hit the like button on this video and the subscribe button so you can make sure and get additional educational videos that we're putting out. Thank you.